In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died, leaving behind a contiguous landmass that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River Valley. Within months, this massive territory shattered into competing factions led by his top generals, a period known as the Diadochi, or the era of the successors. Looking at the early successor states, two powers dominate: Ptolemaic Egypt in the south and the massive Seleucid Empire spanning the former Persian territories. 100 years later, Egypt's borders remain stable. In contrast, the Eastern Seleucid map violently fragments into independent kingdoms. Both of these states were founded by generals from the exact same Macedonian army, utilizing the exact same military doctrines. Yet one thrived for centuries, while the other bled out its eastern territories almost immediately. We often assume that the largest armies or the deepest treasuries dictate survival. The Seleucids possessed both, and still lost the east. The defining variable in their survival was the administrative bedrock they inherited. Stability depended entirely on how well the new Greek rulers meshed with the pre-existing bureaucratic systems of the conquered populations. As we will see, the Seleucid political collapse in the east was a failure of statecraft, but that specific geopolitical disaster inadvertently catalyzed one of the richest cultural fusions in human history. This photograph shows the Nile petting through the desert, a stark visual of Egypt's contained geography. To understand a successful transition, we must start here. For thousands of years, the agrarian economy of the Nile necessitated a central state to manage agriculture. When Ptolemy took control, he co-opted the highly centralized Pharaonic system rather than tearing it down. This chart illustrates the elegance of the Egyptian hierarchy. Because all secular and divine authority converged on a single point, a foreign ruler simply slots perfectly into the apex. Ptolemy became the new pharaoh, instantly inheriting a functioning, top-down bureaucracy. To actually wield that power, the new king had to secure political legitimacy. In Egypt, authority was inseparable from the religious institutions, meaning Ptolemy needed the explicit backing of the local Egyptian priesthood. Securing this alliance required calculated sacrifices. Ptolemy publicly repudiated his Persian wife Artakama, whom he had married during Alexander's campaigns, strictly to appease the Egyptian religious elite and consolidate his local standing. With legitimacy secured, he modernized the economy through cautious, incremental reforms, rather than disrupting the daily lives of the population. He introduced Greek coinage to replace the barter economy and standardized written tax receipts. These upgrades integrated Egyptian agriculture into the wider Mediterranean market without generating local friction. The Ptolemaic state succeeded because it recognized a highly efficient administrative machine, adopted it wholesale, and smoothly tuned it up. Moving east, the geography changes violently. The Seleucid inheritance spanned the Iranian plateau into Bactria, an intimidating, sprawling expanse of mountains and steppes. To manage this scale, the Seleucids adopted the administrative model originally designed by the Persian Emperor Darius I, the Satrapy system. Instead of a centralized hierarchy, the Seleucids managed dozens of autonomous regional governors, scattered across massive distances and tethered by fragile supply lines. The fatal flaw was these satrapies were based on arbitrary geography, ignoring cultural realities. A single satrapy forced deeply divided groups under one roof, causing constant friction. This created what we can call the satrap trap. Give a regional governor his own tax base, his own military resources, and place him months of travel away from the king, and he eventually realizes he does not need the empire. The Persians had already suffered from this exact vulnerability. During Alexander's invasion, the Persian governor of Bactria, Bessus, used his provincial resources to assassinate Emperor Darius and claim power for himself. The Seleucids inherited this exact vulnerability. Just 2 generations into their rule, the Greek governor of Bactria, Diodotus I, broke away using his local wealth to establish the fully independent Greco-Bactrian kingdom. By stubbornly grafting themselves onto the Persian administrative model, the Seleucids unknowingly hard-coded geographic fragmentation and rebellion directly into the foundation of their state. Compounding this administrative fragility was a massive strategic misallocation of resources. The Seleucids obsessed over conquering wealthy Mediterranean provinces at the expense of their eastern holdings. They situated their capital far to the west, in Antioch, Syria. Responding to a crisis in the eastern satrapies meant dispatching orders and armies across a distance that took several months to traverse. This map tracks their geopolitical priorities. Wealth and veteran troops were constantly drained away from the volatile eastern frontier to fund dynastic wars against other Greek states on the Mediterranean coast. The forces left behind to defend the east then faced a lethal tactical mismatch. The Greek military apparatus was built around static military colonies, heavy infantry, and rigid phalanx formations, strategies optimized for pitched battles on flat terrain. This tactical representation shows opponents like the Parthians using highly mobile hit-and-run tactics to outmaneuver heavily armored Greeks. A primary tactic was the feigned retreat. Horse archers pulled back rapidly, baiting Greek infantry to pursue. The moment the phalanx broke shape, cavalry reversed direction and enveloped them in a crossfire. The Seleucid political collapse was finalized by applying the wrong military doctrine to a geography rewarding extreme mobility, handing control to the rising Parthian Empire. If the Seleucid state apparatus failed completely in the east, why do we find Greek script, architecture, and art there centuries after the Macedonians were driven out? As this map fades, stripping away the failed political borders, we find a rich cultural residue embedded in the terrain itself. This points us to the concept of syncretism, the voluntary, organic blending of disparate cultures. Crucially, this blending accelerated only once the threat of military occupation was removed. The Macedonian armies were ejected, but Greek administrative language, urban design, and philosophical traditions voluntarily persisted among the local populations. Excavations at the ancient city of Ai-Khanoum in northern Afghanistan reveal theaters, gymnasiums, and Delphic maxims carved into stone. Greek institutions maintained completely independent of Seleucid rule. Long after Greek political authority vanished, succeeding Asian powers, specifically the Kushan Empire, actively adopted elements of Hellenistic culture into their own courts. This gold Kushan coin features an Asian king, yet the inscription surrounding him uses the Greek alphabet. These rulers utilized Hellenistic script and religious iconography as a localized tool to legitimize their own authority. The absolute pinnacle of this cultural fusion emerged in the Gandhara region, manifesting in Greco-Buddhist art. In statues like this one, local Asian artists depicted the Buddha utilizing the distinct plasticity of Greek sculpture. Notice the heavily draped Hellenistic robes and a facial structure reminiscent of the Greek god Apollo. In a profound historical irony, some Gandharan reliefs even depict the Buddha being physically guarded by the Greek hero Heracles, wielding his traditional club. The Seleucids failed at statecraft because they forced a rigid, centralized administrative and military structure onto a vast, decentralized nomadic world. But by losing their political and military stranglehold, they allowed Hellenistic culture to decouple from Macedonian imperialism. Their failure to hold the territory catalyzed an organic, pan-Asian cultural synthesis that outlasted their empire by hundreds of years.